once upon a time at a black tie event in Pretoria, I was led into a conversation with the president of our beautiful country. And as luck would have it, our bromance began to grow by leaps and bounds such that he decided to terminate all our serious chatter and ask a much more intimate question. He said to me, "Wait a minute, tell me, what is it that you do for a living?" Now, when a billionaire or a CEO or your crush, or best of all, the president of a country stops to ask you what you do for a living, you let it sink, okay? You don't just throw yourself in and perhaps say something like, "Oh, I am a poison taster at the White House." You structure your response so that it seems like you do something for a living. So in my attempt to sound like I'm a responsible South African citizen, I paused and I looked at the president and I said to him, "Mr. President, I chase rats for a living." Ladies and gentlemen, I am in the rat business, but here is the problem. The proverbial rat race is not just an elaborate metaphor to describe how horrible modern business tends to be. I hope the suit does not fool you, but in my business and that of our competitors, the rat race is a reality that we face on a single day. So the logical question then is, how did we wind up here? You see, in 2014, my partner and I saw the national nightly news about how rats plague communities by doing a couple of things. They carry fleas, which pose a health hazard where they come in heavy infestations. Just think about the December of 2017 in Madagascar, where 30 lives were lost because of something called a bubonic plague. Rats also threaten food security in society. And thirdly, and most devastatingly, right here in South African townships, rats have been responsible for the killings of small babies. So then we set out to invent something which would do three things. We would catch as many rats as possible. Secondly, to catch rats of all sizes, from the biggest down to the smallest. And thirdly, to do all of that without poison. We essentially wanted to become the South Africa's closest approximation to Germany's Pied Piper of Hamelin, in a sense that we only wanted to deal with rats that are a matter of national security. So fast forward life to where we are today, in a period of 12 months, using just 20 traps in a small informal settlement, we have caught 4,000 rats. To put that number in context for you, the City of Johannesburg's Environmental Health Department, in a period of 12 months, they caught 1,000 rats in 7 regions around Johannesburg using cages. We have caught the biggest rat ever recorded in South Africa, 661 grams. Now, picture a chicken and divide it by 2. This is the size of half a chicken. The city caught a 440 gram rat. But back up. Before we even got to the 661 rat, we caught a 550 gram rat, and we did what most entrepreneurs would do. We bragged about it to the city, and in typical public servants' candor, they did not give a rat's behind. Until someone in their entity had this bright idea to challenge us to a duel, a 14-day comparative test. They said to us, "We do not buy your numbers. How about we go to an informal settlement and we battle it out? In plain cut and dry terms, we would see who would lead and win the rat race." Without adding any of my words to it, the results were made public, as a matter of fact, by a national newspaper. And this is how it was dubbed. This is how we won the rat race. But to put the numbers in context for you, bear in mind that the weather conditions were not great. It was rainy throughout most of the 14 days. And in 14 days, the city caught 25 rats, and we caught 82 rats. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of innovation. But the problem is that it leaves out of the whole calculus the most important aspect of the whole plot: the adventure. So in 2014, our 1,000-mile journey began with what we later came to call the value of the rat. We thought to ourselves, we grew up in the township, and do you know what story everybody has about the township? It's losing a pair of jeans. Not to human crime, but to rats. When they chew it up in your wardrobe when you sleep. But we thought this was not a very strong business case. We wanted to deal with communities where a 10 kilogram sack of maize meal and a vegetable patch outside are the locals' staple food. Multiply that by 500 shacks in that informal settlement, in the province, in the country, throughout Africa, and the number grows exponentially. So we thought this was a great emotional place to start, but what we needed to do was meet this problem with an invention that is equal to or greater than the problem itself. So then we invented and patented this. And we pitched it to investors this way. They bought into it. We were excited, and we went straight to Alexandria. We were headed straight to Alexandria, a township which is north of Johannesburg, coyly known as the hub of rat infestation. Now, if you're not from South Africa, think about Silicon Valley, but for rats. This is a place where rats come in small and they grow to become great. Pretty much like the birds in Silicon Valley which grow to become Twitter. I would like to take you to Alex to show you that every rat's dream in the world, be it Harvard, a rat from Harvard, a rat from Oxford or Australia, wants to ultimately land in Alex where they could further their studies because rats in Alex are that big. So then we arrived in Alex only to be greeted by a young lad who had with him a box that contained 2 sworn enemies, a dead supersized rat and an owl that was barely alive. He said to us, these owls were dispatched by the city of Johannesburg. I don't know how it ended up here, but I saved its life because it was being mauled by rats. And not because I love animals, but I wanted to make money out of it. I'm on my way to a local traditional healer, and I am going to sell it. This is Alex, he said. Your trap will not work here. So we planted our trap, and we came back 5 days later to monitor the results. When we got there, he was right. Alex is not for the faint-hearted traps. So as an entrepreneur, what do you do when what you have created does not work for the very first time? You structure your design one more time to see how it could work, perhaps in a different environment. And that is exactly what we did. We had another iteration, and it did not work. Then we had more iterations, 30 more iterations, and none of them worked in different environment, from farms down to informal settlements. None of those iterations worked. Until one day we had this bright idea of taking one of the iterations that did not work, and we thought to ourselves, how about we change the color from white to black? And magic began to happen. Now, I don't know if changing trap color from white to black was a political thing in the rat community. But it worked. It worked, and we started catching rats in their numbers, and we continued with that trail of thought. And that's how we started catching them in their numbers. This was around our 34th model. We had another iteration to perfect this thing. And 35th model, 36th, 37th, lo and behold, we did not fail. We found 37 ways why a rat trap does not work. And we went public with our 38th model, and that's how we won the rat race. To take you back to the value of the rat, And I'm sure that you remember that when I began this, I talked about it as it being an hypothesis. But allow me to take you back, but this time with the reality that we are creating for people and hopefully for communities in the future. What you see on the screen is a small vegetable patch that belongs to a lady who could not grow crops simply because she lives in an environment that is heavily infested with rats. While we were doing our testing, we went to her and we said to her, how about we install our trap and see what that would do? We did that, and the problem was solved. In the same community, there's a gentleman whose main source of income is using his van as a delivery tool around the community. But his only problem is that from time to time, he could be taken out of business because the rats would mount up the engine from underneath and shoot through the cables down there, rendering him out of business, the rats. During our test phase, we said, show us where you park and we will plant our trap and you will just park over it. We did that, and bought your uncle, the problem was solved. Innovation is not about chasing rats or winning the rat race. It is about creating realities that were not there for communities before. And this is the most significant part of the work that we do. Going into the deepest and darkest holes to ensure that communities connect with what is possible. Earlier on, I told the president what it is that I do and how I do it. But this, ladies and gentlemen, is the reason why we do what we do. Thank you.